Shalom, salam, peace be unto you. Welcome back to the Septuagint versus the Masoretic channel. Today we're wrapping up the book of Joshua. This is the final chapter of the book, chapter 24. There are 33 verses in this chapter. The first difference I'm going to go over is Joshua set them. In verse 1, Joshua set them, versus they simply presented themselves. In verse 4, the first mentionable is an omission of, and became there a great and populous, mighty and mighty nation. And the Mizraimites afflicted them. So that detail was left out of the narrative there. Verse 5, and I smote Mizraim with the wonders that I wrought among them, versus I sent Moses also and Aaron, and I plagued Egypt according to that which I did among them, and afterward I brought you out. So we can see the focus in verse 5 in the Septuagint is more on the wonders that Yah did, versus the focus being Moses and Aaron and Yah, all three sharing the spotlight there. And not so much the wonders, but more the plagues. Verse 6, our versus your, referring to fathers. Horses versus horsemen, we versus they. In verse 7, an omission of a cloud. He put a cloud and darkness. Continuous difference of Yah did versus I did. What I have done. However, the one speaking in the Masoretic is Yah. Verse 10, not destroy you, versus I would not hearken unto Balaam. So it's one thing to not be destroyed by Yah. It's another thing where Yah would not listen to Balaam. Greatly blessed us versus blessed us still. So to be greatly blessed is on another level from simply being blessed still. Delivered them to us was omitted. Delivered them. Because I delivered you is the same thing as rescued you. But they were not delivered. The enemies are not delivered to them in the Masoretic. Verse 12, significant difference of in terms of numbers. We have here 12 kings being described versus only 2 kings of the Amorites. So which is it? Verse 14. Righteousness and justice versus sincerity and truth. Okay, verse 15 is a memory verse. I'm going to read it in the Masoretic first because it is a memory verse. And if it seem evil unto you to serve Yah, choose you this day whom you will serve, whether the Elohim which your fathers served, that were on the other side of the flood, or the Elohim of the Amorites in whose land you dwell. And this is the memory verse portion. But as for me and my house, we will serve Yah. How is it expressed in the Septuagint? It says here, rather than evil, but if it seem evil unto you, it says, but if it seem not good to you. to serve Yah. And I'll just read the last part here. But I and my house will serve Yah, for he is holy. So that's a pretty big omission. I'm just going to put that there. BD. It's one thing to just say you're going to serve him, but why? The rationale is given. Because he is set apart. He is holy. So that is very important. Not only that, but I and my house, that's grammatically correct. Me and my house is actually not grammatically correct. Verse 16, far be it from us versus God forbid. We saw that in a previous chapter in this book. Verse 17, a big omission. He is God. Yah, our Elohim, he is Elohim. This is going to be reminiscent of Elijah and the prophets of this Elohim, Baal, which we have not covered yet, but it is a very significant account. A lot of people tend to memorize that story. An addition from the house of bondage in verse 17. Verse 17. And which did those great signs in our sight. Amorite and all nations versus all nations, even the Amorite. So specifically out of all nations, even the Amorite. Yes, we will serve Yah versus also. So it seems to be more affirmative in the Septuagint. So I'll just put more affirmative in the Sept. Verse 20, because he has done you good versus after that he has done you good. So again, rationale is being used here versus timeline. Timeline of events specifically. Verse 22, in addition of, and they said, we are witnesses, or witnesses, and they said witnesses. Verse 23, set your heart right toward Yah versus incline your heart unto Yah. So you can incline your heart in a wrong way, but if you set your heart right, then that is correct. It is acceptable. So being acceptable versus perhaps inclining your heart does not mean it is right. It is acceptable because again our hearts can be not deceiving like it doesn't say in Jeremiah 17, but our hearts can be inclined in a wrong way. It can be wrong. The intents could be right, but our hearts can be wrong still. Verse 25, a law versus a statute. There's an omission of before the tabernacle of the God of Israel. Verse 26, laws versus law. The oak versus unoak. So it's not just unoak, it's a specific oak that is perhaps distinct. So perhaps a distinct oak. An addition of by the sanctuary. 27, this rock heard all the words that have been spoken to it, versus which he spoke to us. So this is a massive difference. I say this could be a messianic verse. How can a rock, this stone, how can this stone listen to these words? And this shall be among you for a witness in the last days. And it is this stone. It was not inserted, only in the second part. It shall be therefore a witness unto you, lest you deny your Elohim. So again, the rock was, or I should say the stone was omitted. For it has heard all the words. Okay. This rock heard all the words that have been spoken to it. So it's not so much that the rock is listening. The difference in the Septuagint is that the rock heard the words that were spoken to it. So Yah spoke to the rock. So maybe that is related to how Yah instructed Moses to speak to the rock, because he's speaking to the rock as well, perhaps. That's just my opinion. Verses which he spoke to us. So the words were not addressed to the rock, but only to the people. But the words, in fact, were addressed to the rock as well as the people, because the rock, or I should say the stone, technically is a witness, as it is expressed in this verse 27 here. So again, I outline this as I draw your attention to this because I believe it possibly is, very likely a messianic verse that has been censored and edited to cover this up. Verse 28, because let me just hearken back to the New Testament. It says, the rock that followed them was Mashiach, was Christ. So perhaps this is an allusion, or that is an allusion to this verse, perhaps. Verse 28, dismissed, versus let them depart, let the people depart. So Joshua has the authority to dismiss them, and he uses his authority, versus he let them leave because they just wanted to leave. He didn't dismiss them, they just wanted to leave, and okay, you want to go, then go. So that seems to be somewhat of a significant difference. So let me just notate that. SD, okay. And verse 30, Gilead versus Gaash. There's an omission as well in verse 30. There they put with him into the tomb in which they buried him the knives of stone with which he circumcised the children of Israel in Gilgal, when he brought them out of Mizraim, as Yah appointed them, and there they are to this day. So this has been omitted throughout the narrative, not just in this chapter, but a previous chapter in which this is spoken of or mentioned. Elders that lived as long as Joshua, versus they overlived Joshua. So they lived longer than he did and outlived him, you could say. Versus they lived as long as he did. Perhaps they didn't die all at the same time, but they perhaps had the same length of years. 100, I believe it was 110 years. 32, Amorites versus sons of Hamor. And then we see here 100 ewe lambs versus 100 pieces of silver. So which is more valuable? How much is one ewe lamb worth in the modern day in 2023? Versus how much is 100 silver coins worth in our modern day? So I did the math. 40, which is the estimated cost of one ewe lamb. I should say not 40. $40 is how much a silver coin would cost, a very fine silver coin. 1 ounce times 100 is $4,000. Okay. That's how much that the portion of the land was purchased for, $4,000. Doesn't seem like a lot of money, no. But when you go with the Septuagint narrative of it's worth 100 ewe lambs, the average cost of a ewe lamb would be around $350 to $400. Multiplied by 100, that's 35 to 40 grand. So yeah, land would cost that much, and that's a valuable piece of land, isn't it? Almost 10 times as much compared to what the Masoretic is valuing, or described as silver versus ewe lambs. Verse 33, Gaba'ar of Phinehas versus the hill of Phinehas. There is an omission as well of, in that day, the children of Israel took the ark of God and carried it about among them. And Phinehas exercised the priest's office in the room of Eleazar his father till he died. And he was buried in his own place, Gaba'ar. But the children of Israel departed every one to their place and to their own city. And the children of Israel worshipped, I'm not going to say the name there, but you can read that. And it seems to repeat these names. However, in the Greek, there are different names. One ends with a tarte, one ends with the tarath. And the gods of the nations are round about them, so not just these two Elohim, but other ones as well. And Yah delivered them into the hands of Eglon, king of Moab. And he ruled over them 18 years. So this long account was omitted, completely erased from the Masoretic record. So the question that came up for me was, what's the difference between Tarte and Tarath? Well, I did my research, and this, I'm just going to read the names just for understanding. Ishtar or Inanna came first, around 4000 to 3100 BC. However, Astarte is a Phoenician/Hellenized version of Ishtar, which was worshipped at the beginning of the Bronze Age, around 3300 to 1200 BC. However, Ashtaroth is the plural form of Ashtoreth. Astaroth is probably named after Astarte. So the Astarte is really the, I guess you could say, the original of the two, between those two fake Elohim. And that's all. I think that's all for this chapter. So yeah, it is. It's bittersweet. I'll tell you why. It's because you start to grow attached to these characters. When I ended the books of Moses, the Torah, it was sad because it said that how he died, and we all know that they died. Moses, Aaron, Joshua. But to actually, go through this narrative, you start to get to know them like they're living and breathing people. And so, when it does mention here that Joshua dies, or died, and it says here how long he lived. Let's see, where is that? The verse 29. There, he died at the age of 110 years. So that is kind of sad to read. Yes, it's factual, but you still get attached to these historical figures. So we're going to move on to the book of Judges. Before I start to move on to the next book, I am going to try to record more videos for the Book of Jubilee series that I've started to do, or I narrated and offer commentary. So I might take a little break between Joshua and Judges. I might even do summary videos to summarize the big differences in the book of Joshua, instead of so for people who don't have time to watch all 24 videos, they could simply watch the big differences between the Septuagint and the Masoretic for the book of Joshua that I found, the biggest ones. We'll see how we proceed there, but in the meantime, look forward to the Book of Jubilees narration. So thank you very much for your time, ladies and gentlemen. It's been a pleasure to present the book of Joshua to you, all the differences for you. Until next time, shalom, shalom, salam, and peace be unto you. Maranatha, you've been watching the Septuagint versus the Masoretic.